how do you go just beyond keeping the status quo to then building something that gives back to the soil and nature to continue to make better fruit year on year.
Today we're going to ask the question of, do you really understand wine if you never actually made it? I'm Trent. We're here on an unapologetically unprofessional, unfiltered wine journey. And we were saying here, we drink, we try, we learn, and we connect. Now, most of us drink wine, but most of us don't really actually take that step to actually make wine. So we think that wine's a very simple process, but I understand it's actually not that simple. So we're going to chat to James Follent, amateur winemaker who has dabbled in sparkling Chardonnay. He's dabbled in Mead, raspberry Mead. He's dabbled in Merlot and also in Vermentino as well. So there's a conversation about trial and error, happy accidents, curiosity as well, and understand a bit more about how does wine actually get made. So James, or according to your website, Lord James?
Yes, that's a little bit of a fun fact for pre-positioning things for both. I've got a passion for sustainability.
Yeah.
So I came across a website that aligned with conservation efforts, and I was able to purchase about 2 square feet to then be able to get a nice novelty certificate with Lord James Follent on it. So I've thrown that on the website for a little bit of fun because I'm also curious what happens if people have AI crawlers out of my website reading it.
So do you get a certificate or something?
I do have a nice little certificate I could print out and frame.
Oh, wow. You got to send that through. We'll stick it up as well. Where is your patch of land then?
So I think there's like in a kind of a natural forest in Scotland to protect some of the highlands as part of it. And it's one of those fun things where they might send you like a little QR code or here's your longitude and latitude with where that plot would be as part of that experience. So
so one of your endeavours to visit your patch of land.
It would be a lot of fun to go visit Scotland and see that if it was possible. But it's also just fun being able to look it up on Google Maps. And
but you're not Scottish heritage though?
No Scottish heritage. It's probably more likely to be English and then maybe French with the way my surname was a transcription error.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. As we do with all our guests, we've got the Icebreaker Questions.
Awesome.
So first one, most memorable wine or most memorable wine moment?
My most memorable wine moment would have to be my wedding day. In 2020, my wife and I got married during COVID, which was a memorable time for building a relationship together, as well as when we signed off on a fixed price contract for a dinner for a reception. And then a pandemic happens. It meant that some of our guests dropped out, but we'd already committed. So we've bumped up kind of the drinks package. We've bumped up the meals. What else can we spend money on? So I was really fortunate that they had an extensive cellar list. So at our bridal table, I got to cherry pick a number of great wines, and 3 of the highlights would be we got to enjoy a 1996 bottle of Penfolds Grange, a 1998 bottle of Penfolds Bin 389, as well as a 2011 Brokenwood Graveyard Shiraz next to each other. And it was an amazing experience because one of our bridesmaids kind of knocked back the Grange very quickly and was like, oh, this is delicious. And then the sommelier was kind enough to pour another glass. And she's like, what is it? And then she realized what it was. And you could see the penny drop as part of that moment, which was a lot of fun.
Awesome. So there is a positive out of COVID.
There is a positive out of COVID as part of that.
Last bottle of wine that you've had?
So the last bottle of wine I had was a 2019 de Beaurepaire Le Chevalier, which is a Merlot Cabernet Petit Verdot blend. And the reason I was sipping on that one was for a little bit of research because I was out in Ralston last Monday picking Merlot from that vineyard. So it was interesting to start thinking about what it could be as I was making it in my garage.
What a story. Next one. If you could share a bottle with a person past or present, who would it be and what bottle would you pick?
I'd have to, I was mulling over what this might be. And I was thinking, going back to like Jesus's time and that first miracle where he turned water into wine. And it'd be like, what did that wine taste like? And what would it be like to hang out with Jesus as part of that process?
So it'd be Jesus with his wine that he made from water.
Exactly. And then the other one would be like the Last Supper. What was going on as part of that with the wine that they were drinking?
Yeah. What happened? Was it really what that kind of painting depicted or something else?
How did it go? And what did wine in the first century look and taste like?
Yeah, I think they mixed it up with a lot of herbs and honey or something like that.
Yeah, so I've heard about Posca from Merrick Watts' episode that you did, and I'm like, I wonder how close Posca would be to some of the stuff Romans were doing.
I think quite
back
close.
Then. So.
Quite close. Next one. Most unique or ultimate food and wine pairing?
Ooh, I think I'm a sucker for enjoying a nice, big, bold red wine, Shiraz or Cabernet, with a steak medium rare. And just the way those flavors tend to pair together.
You're a traditionalist, I think.
Yeah, so.
Perfect. Next one. What's the biggest lesson learned on your wine journey?
I think the biggest lesson is don't drop the 23-litre Moscato juice all over the kitchen floor. That was a hard lesson last year. We were cleaning up after making some wine, and I like Moscato because my wife loves drinking sweet wines, and I had crushed it, was finishing up that day, was bringing that inside the cold crash, and that glass 23-litre carboy had a handle on it, but the neck of it was wet. So it slipped and shattered all over the floor. And it was heartbreaking to see all my hard work.
Red wine would have been worse though, right?
Red wine would have been much worse for what it could do for potentially staining floorboards and things. Thankfully, called in the in-laws, and there was a wet vac nearby that we could get in to clean up the floor and clean up the mess.
I could imagine Moscato would actually smell all right though.
It did, but because it's so sweet and sugary, there's probably still a few pieces of furniture that we didn't quite clean under for like fridges and things that we'd have to sort out eventually.
My wife and I were always battling ant problems. I hope you didn't have that then afterwards.
Not immediately.
Not immediately. Okay, last one. If you could bottle a moment in your life like a vintage, what vintage would it be and why?
I think 2025 was a pretty special year for my wife and I. One of our highlights of that, we got a dog named Milo, and he's a miniature fox terrier, and he's got this beautiful brown coat that's this kind of Milo chocolatey colour.
Hence the name,
Hence the name. So he's been such a joy to our life as part of that. I really doubled down on the winemaking. So I think I produced almost 300 bottles last year in my garage, and definitely felt in love with hand-picking grapes from vineyards, and also did the Sydney Marathon when it was the world major, and I took 30 minutes off my time.
Dog, marathon, doubled winemaking, anything else?
And that was kind of the big trio of highlights through that year, and it was just a really awesome year celebrating milestone birthdays, my wife and I as well. So
making wine at home, is your wife bought into it? Like, I can imagine you're taking up a lot of space, creating a lot of mess.
It does. We're not parking a car in the garage at the moment. She takes much more delight when I have friends over to help me crush the grapes and press the grapes and clean up the grapes. So grapes are also poisonous to dogs. So on the days that we don't have anyone to help, she's often out there with me, giving me an extra hand to finish the cleanup and make sure no stray grape skins go from the driveway to the backyard for the dog.
Awesome. Partner in life and partner in winemaking. But we're going to delve into your wine journey. So how did your wine journey start, James?
I think one of the memorable moments in it, I was buying wine to earn Qantas points. And I had the goal of buying a around the world business class ticket from the points. Now, COVID dashed those plans. I'd booked the flights for my wife and I's honeymoon, and then I had to unwind them. But that's when my passion for wine really kind of started, grew and developed. And I was tasting, trying different things, learning what I liked. And now I've started visiting more cellar doors and things. And then I had a moment, particularly in 2019, in the lead up to my wife and I getting married. She's like, you work in tech. Can you get a hobby that's not in front of a computer? And my father-in-law into collecting trains, and I decided to get into collecting wine. Because also around that Christmas, one of my wife's uncles pulled out a bottle from his cellar. And it was one of the first times where it really clicked that you can sell a wine and see it develop over time. And all of a sudden, primary characteristics drop away. You might lose the fruit, but then those tertiary characteristics, kind of that leathery chocolate wood. And I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. The rewards of patience that you get as part of that then kind of really kicked off learning more about wine
and that
more
was a
deeply.
moment for you then, that kind of
that was that was a turning point around the corner that pushed me more deeply into the wine world.
Do you remember what bottle it was?
The bottle that was the catalyst, I think I put out a 2015 St. Hugo Cabernet to the Christmas party. He's like, why are you opening that now?
Yeah.
And I'm like, because I wanted it in a raffle. And I'm like, I thought I'd bring it to Christmas. I've heard you like red wine. And then he's like, now, let me tell you what like an older red wine can look like. And that's when he grabbed something. So it was a beautiful lesson in education from his experience.
So that was the start of it. Are you still delving into his cellar and see what else he's got then?
It's like we've had a few awesome moments over time where he used to have a farm up at Ralston and the family would get together and we'd often bring out some cellar treasures, each of us, and enjoy dinner on a big long table together. And then we'd pull out some nice wines. We'd often refer to them as farm grade because it'd be that special time of year where we'd all come together and share them. And there were some great wines that were pulled out from different places. I think I remember getting to try an Australis from Clarendon Hills, and there was a beautiful concentration to it as well as a whole variety of other things.
Yeah. So you're trying these amazing wines. As you mentioned, Australis, you had the Grange at your wedding. How did that then kind of really evolve into a passion of actually making wine? That's a huge step, right?
It is. It's a big step. And I think there was something that happened around end of 2023, 2024, where I got really curious about it. I'm not sure if it's like seeing videos of people making mead that I'm like, oh, is this something maybe I can learn about doing? Like, how hard is fermentation? And another thing, I'd seen rumors of the Sydney Amateur Winemakers Club around, but I didn't realize that they were meeting. But one of the other winemakers I'm in touch with, Jeff Aston from Tractorless Vineyard, he had a winemaking course on his website. So I was like, why not try this and give it a go and see if I like it and learn about it for something fun that year as a remarkable moment in 2024. And that was something I committed to and went on that journey to start learning the process. I joined Sydney Amateur Winemakers Club as part of that. And then 2026, this is my third vintage of making wine at home.
So was it from scrolling like YouTube, looking at someone making mead, and then it kind of led from there?
I think it led from there. And I've also got a friend who's into beer brewing. So he had a lot of gear that's kind of able to work for fermenting things. And he understands that you add the yeast and do all those little things as part of it to brew a beer. So then I was able to kind of go sideways off some of that and, hey, let's get together, grab some honey, make a mead and see how that goes.
So start with mead, which we'll try a version of that a bit later. But you mentioned also the Sydney Amateur Winemakers Club as well. What is it? How did you come across it? Tell me a bit more about it.
One of it, like I've heard like Googling Amateur Winemakers Club or Winemakers Club just to try and get connected with a group of people to learn more about making wine. And it turns out they've been meeting for like over 50 years. So I think this year will be their 52nd annual Amateur Winemakers show where we come together in September and kind of bring together bottles we've made over the years, get some judges in and effectively have them scored and appraised as if we were professionals in the industry. And we're getting wine judges in who would be scoring like a New South Wales Wine Awards to then give us the feedback. And they're really good at being able to point out faults and different things. So being able to get connected with that group, great community. They've got years of experience in how they're doing it as part of it, and then often coming together for miniature competitions. So we might have 1 month we're focused on table white wine, another month table red wine, could be an aged red wine, could also be let's have a fruit wine, things like a passion fruit wine. The most exotic one is a rosemary wine that I've tried where they've managed to mix rosemary and sugar and bring that together. And it's like, this could go really well with lamb. This could be delicious as part of how that comes together. And it's a club that meets first Thursday of each month. And it's a great community of guys. So I'd say if you're ever interested in coming along, Sydney AWC, amateurwinemakersclub.com. So that's Sydney Alpha Whiskey Charlie. A shout out for anyone who's listening to the audio version of the podcast. I helped them do up a little website to be able to keep track of some of the events and just help with being able to Google and find out what they're doing. So it's a great community to come together and learn, and they're really welcoming to new members. And I found that over the years, and being able to share knowledge has been a lot of fun. Is it purely
amateurs though, or is it like some people that's actually been in the industry that kind of show you the ropes on?
Yeah, no, like they're pretty much all amateurs, and seeing how they've done things, often Mediterranean heritage as part of it. So they might be making wine in an Italian style because of Italian lineage.
How their father, how their grandfather.
Exactly. And it's a cultural thing that they're keeping alive as part of it, which is awesome to see and embrace. And the other thing that helped with that, like about March and April, over kind of 10 weeks, depending on the season, the Flemington markets at Sydney actually truck in a whole bunch of grapes over the Friday and the Saturday, which is really exciting because then people can go there, pick up kind of boxes of 15 kilograms of grapes for maybe $25.
And these aren't your table grapes.
These aren't your table grapes. You can get Shiraz, you can get Merlot, you can get some Chardonnay.
Vermentino.
Vermentino is handpicked, but like it depends. And if you go in, you talk to them, ask them what they have. It's amazing trying to see the variety of different things. And then it gives that room for learning, growing, experimenting. So I definitely encourage, if anyone's interested, come along.
Sounds pretty cool. So one part of it is learning about winemaking. The second big part is around community as well, right? What does that feel like in terms of the community around the amateur winemakers?
Yeah, and I love that they almost meet in the lower room of Club Rivers in Riverwood. And as part of it, it's almost, there might be someone kind of facilitating the meeting towards the front, but we're often sitting kind of in a rectangle. So it might be a kind of open discussion of, hey, where have people been getting grapes this season? And then it'll be different people kind of, hey, I've tried making maybe some Riesling from Orange. Oh, actually, Riesling wasn't available this year. Therefore, we were able to get Sauvignon Blanc from that producer, and different things like that. And just kind of that collaboration, because different people have different connections with different winemakers and different vineyards to get access to different grapes and things, which has been exciting.
So how has that guided you on your wine journey? Because you would have just came in there with a certain view around certain grape varieties, right? So that would have kind of opened your eyes. What have you kind of seen, and what has it kind of given you?
Yeah, and I think just the way I enjoy wine when I buy it from a bottle shop helps me appreciate the amount of hard work that goes to putting that bottle in the bottle shop, putting it on a table, and the amount of energy and effort those winemakers are putting into that, and the variability, like year on year. Grapes are an agricultural product. So things like frost can damage vine, hail can damage vine at the wrong time, and then those damaged vines can potentially mean wipe out a crop or reduce it dramatically for a winemaker.
What was there a certain thing that surprised you most when you first joined the Amateur Winemakers Club?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't think I was necessarily...
You went in there not knowing entirely what it's about, right?
I was just kind of eyes wide open with curiosity about how to do things. If anything, it helped accelerate my learning curve to make less mistakes. So I think about like oxidation and faults in wine, and learning about things like potassium metabisulfite is a thing that I can add to the wine that I'm making to add sulfur. So when you read on a wine bottle contains sulphites, that's the thing that stops the wine going bad. And I'm like, oh wow, that's fascinating. So then learning about some of those things as part of it, and I've just been amazed at how much the surprise would be just the amount of effort you put into cleaning things. Cleaning and sanitizing is absolutely essential to making a nice wine.
And you're doing it at a small scale. You can imagine for some of these other winemakers at that larger scale, how much effort and work's required.
Exactly. Like I might be getting the garden hose in the backyard, hosing things down and then sanitizing my equipment. But like, what are they out there with? Like, do you have to get the pressure washer out to then hose down that 1 ton grape bin before you send it back out to get another batch?
You're talking about kind of spraying and washing things. We've got the something to spray as well, maybe. The sparkling Chardonnay 2025 Riverland. Tell us about this one.
So this was Chardonnay grapes I picked up from Flemington markets one morning, probably March last year. I was hoping to experiment making a sparkling wine as part of that. So if you crack it and we can taste it, it was a delight to try. This is one where I've kind of realized white wines work really well when you have cold and cool fermentation. I'm doing it in my garage. So what are there for ways around that? So you might notice it almost turned beery and yeasty.
Yes.
I used a friend's pressure fermenter for his beer and used a particular yeast called Kveik, which is often associated with beer.
Yeah.
And the reason I chose that yeast is it can handle fermentation temperatures between 30 and 40 degrees Celsius and trying to build a wine with a bit more texture. So it's lightly sparkling. I'd call it a twinkling wine, and that would be because the way that I bottled it, I used a beer filling gun because I bought the wrong piece of equipment. I needed a counter pressure bottle filler to keep the CO2 in and not have it release. So I know that when we crack it, the bubbles will go pretty
I tasted a bit of the bubbles.
And it's also probably got a little bit of residual sweetness in there because the techniques that I used on that pressure fermenter, yeast needs good nutrients. It can be stressed out by the alcohol content as well as CO2 pressure.
Yeah.
So with the Kveik, I think the CO2 helped to stop fermentation a little bit early. So it's still got some residual sweetness in there with how it's been bottled and re-fermentation because it's been with CO2 in the wine hasn't kicked back off as part of that. So it's quite an interesting and different take on a sparkling.
It's very interesting. You mentioned it's kind of yeasty. It's got kind of body to it as well, but it's got sweetness. It's almost like a fuller Moscato.
Yeah.
Because it has that kind of sweetness, a bit of bubbles to it as well, but very tasty type of wine.
Yeah.
It from your garage, is it?
And this was all made in my garage. So the grapes actually would have probably trucked in from the Riverland in South Australia to the Sydney Flemington markets, and I picked up a whole bunch.
Yeah.
And that's the sparkling version that I did. I gifted you you and Jason can taste the still version, which is a bit more avant-garde and alternative.
Okay, cool. One of the things you noticed there is Chateau Fallon. So is this kind of like a hark back to your kind of French roots?
So hark back to our French roots. The family legend is that we have some French lineage in there as part of that. And when family came over to Australia, our surname's actually a transcription error. So it actually may have been Follett with Follett, but it was written down wrong in a logbook. So our surname like that changed when they arrived in Australia. So it's pretty safe to say that if I see a surname Follent, I can usually kind of trace that back in Australia somewhere.
It gives it authenticity as well, right? Because it's Chateau.
It does. And that French connection, it's probably more of doing family research where it sounds like it might be the word for like foolish, mad or airy for the French word as part of it. So I'm like, Follent sounds French enough, so why not say Chateau Follent as part of that? And I think there's this beautiful irony because I'm making wine in my garage and a man's home is his castle. Chateau Follent, how good to kind of have that play on my home is where I make my wine.
Perfect. You should have actually like a picture of a chateau, like kind of, I don't know, a version of your house and what it looks like on it as well.
I did try
you did?
doing that, but I couldn't get the balance of the graphic to work with AI to generate that for me.
Often with chateaus as well, they have the year that was founded. So when did you start off with Chateau Follent?
I'd have to probably like 2024 would be the year I started doing it. The label is continuing to evolve as my graphic design skills get better in Canva each year. And I learn more about the printing of the labels. Like I think the sparkling Chardonnay had a much more nicer balance to it with the edging. Whereas I went really big and bold for the labels I printed for the Vermentino and the Merlot. And I'm like, oh, that probably needs a little bit more white space for balance. So it's this beautiful learning experience each year. I'm hopefully getting a little bit better with the craft.
We're talking before you're in tech anyway. I'm sure you're kind of leaning on AI a lot to start to create.
It's amazing how much winemaking advice AI can give you.
Right or wrong, though?
I think it's been pretty robust with the amount of things out there. If anything, it's the risk of human error. when I give it the wrong metrics.
Okay. We touched on before about how it's also changed your perspective on wine as well, mainly around the amount of effort that's required to do it. Has also changed how you perceive quality in wine as well?
Yeah, I think I'm more conscious of some of the sustainable factors going into the vineyard and how that is shaping the quality of the fruit. So coming and like meeting people like Jeff Aston, Will de Beaurepaire from Tractus and de Beaurepaire Wines have a really strong regenerative approach to looking after vineyards. And that's something I found inspiring because it builds more resilience into the winemaking, and healthier vines make better wines is the catchphrase that I'd use. And it's amazing to kind of see and understand.
You should have it here somewhere.
Yeah, so I'm still making, because I'm getting grapes from wherever I can get my hands on. We can talk about the dream later, but if I could plan a regenerative vineyard, that would be an amazing place.
Yeah, and they should have the greater vines make greater wines.
Yeah, awesome. As part of that.
Perfect. So, but has it also, I kind of want to delve into it, like, has it taught you a bit more about drinking wine, appreciating wine, what is a good wine versus a bad wine?
Yeah, and I think it's helped me understand kind of the balance through the winemaking process, the importance of picking at the right time, because there's the balance of the acid, the tannin, the ripeness that all contributes to the fruit character. So you can only make wine as good as the fruit that you pick and source as part of that. So if you can start with a focus on wine growing rather than wine making, you can really focus on that aspect of it. And I think de Beaurepaire's philosophy has been an influence for me. The idea of the word vigneron is a wine grower. So you grow your wine rather than make it, because the making it is that portion that happens to get it from the vine to the bottle. Yeah.
Maybe slightly controversial as well, like through your drinking. I'm guessing you're also going, oh, that's not an $80 wine, or that's not a $100 wine, or
it's definitely
or vice versa as well, going, oh, that $10 wine actually is drinking like a $60 wine.
Yeah, and I think one thing for red wines in particular, the importance of oak in adding shape, but also understanding how expensive an oak barrel is for contributing to the quality and the flavor of the wine as part of that year on year. So it's definitely kind of trying a different wine here and there. I'm like, oh, would I want to pay that? But I've also, on the flip side, love things like New South Wales wines, the Cellar Door event that they tend to put on around October, November, being able to taste and try from different producers and learn and see what they're doing as part of that. And I think what that has taken my journey towards is I'm often trying to buy from producers and trying to buy from the cellar door rather than buying from the supermarket or Dan's.
Yeah. Do you think you're more sensitive now to the imperfections of wine as well, knowing about how it's made? You mentioned before about making sure everything's kind of clean and hygienic. Obviously, that also contributes to maybe some kind of barnyard taste or something like that in wine. Like, are you a bit more susceptible to?
I think I'm more aware of, hey, what I'm looking out for, like VA, volatile acidity, as part of it, what could be faulty. We often do mini comps where we're sitting down and scoring each other's wine at the Amateur Winemakers Club. So we're kind of scoring points for clarity, for nose to smell it and taste. And we're kind of looking for, even in each other's wines, like, how's it holding up? Are there things that might be a little bit off, a little bit interesting with it as part of that? So it's made me think more about, hey, how do I rate quality of wine?
We'll continue on the winemaking journey to our next one, which is the Chateau Follent. Follent? Is that French? Vermentino Mudgee 2025. 10% alcohol. Tell us about this one.
So this would be kind of that fascinating one where my passion and love for hand-picking wine first kind of arose. It was an opportunity to drive out to Mudgee, spend the night there, and then get up in the morning and start picking grapes off a vineyard there. So thankful for First Ridge Estate and how they're doing Italian varieties there. And this is where kind of ripeness and getting it from the vineyard kind of impacts sugar levels, acid as part of it. So I was there with 3 guys from the Sydney Amateur Winemakers Club. I think 2 or 3 of us picked some of that Vermentino. So we were able to see how we've done it differently.
So was this your first time doing Vermentino?
First time doing Vermentino. So I've tried to go for a more textured wine with what I've made, because the pretty aromatics that come from white wines often require cool fermentation. So this was just room temperature in the garage. And when we measured the sugar levels, it was kind of 10% alcohol. So one of the other guys added sugar to help increase the 11-12% mark to kind of round out that white wine as part of what it was doing. But then the acid balance was like really nice at a pH of 3.0 for a white wine. So I was like, okay, I'll keep it as is and see how I go with it for my first white wine.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Wow. So talk me through that process. So you're there, you wake up in the morning, you go there, you pick grapes.
And
then you're not making it there though, right?
You're not making them. I'm driving it 4 hours back to Sydney from Mudgee to then crush it at home. And that day was an awesome day, because I was also figuring out how to use a basket press that I got. And it was just like, how does this contraption go together? So crushed and destemmed the grapes in a machine that has rollers that press the grape through, take the stem off, and then effectively getting a large bucket, tipping it into that basket press, and then trying to get the free run juice and then squash as much as I can out of it. Add a little bit of sulfur to stop it from oxidizing with potassium metabisulfate, and then get it into a vessel to cold stabilize and drop the solids out before then I add yeast the day later to start it fermenting.
So you're still relatively early in your journey, but I'm sure you made some huge fuck-ups along the way. What are some of those things that you...
The most memorable one, trying to learn about things that help stabilize wine. So there's 2 things you can add. Potassium metabisulfite helps protect the wine with sulfur dioxide, which is awesome to prevent it from oxidizing. There's also something called potassium sorbate, which helps to stop yeast re-fermenting. So great for a sweet wine to help stabilize it. What potassium sorbate does is, if you add it to a wine after it's been through malolactic fermentation, it adds a geranium characteristic to the wine with the way that reacts with, I think, the lactic acid in that. And it is a memorable experience. You get that whiff of geranium in the glass, and it's like, oh no.
So not pleasant then.
It depends on what you enjoy. It's different. It's technically a fault on the Australian Wine Research Institute. And it was kind of like, oh man, I've got 50 litres of this. I've made a mistake that I'm never going to make again.
So what'd you do? You poured it away or drank it?
I've bottled it and learnt from it as part of it, because I think one of the beautiful things about wine, they say customer is always right in matters of taste. So I can say, hey, tell me what you think. I've maybe had one really good bottle where it wasn't impacted. The other ones have something. So take it to the Sydney Amateur Winemakers Club, and they're like, ooh, what happened here is kind of the reaction. They can tell immediately something's not precise with how it's been made.
You mentioned before dropping the Moscato grapes and the juice everywhere. Has there been any other of those kind of situations?
I've thankfully avoided making any more carboys breaking inside the house, because now I'm not allowed to bring it in the house. So I'm doing it literally all in the garage. And it's made me also put a hand underneath what I'm carrying as part of it. And I think I've realized the human capacity, I can maybe move up to 30 litres or 30 kilos on my own. And anything beyond that, I probably need someone's help and some extra hands to do safely.
Remind me, how many bottles are you making at the moment?
So I would have done about 300 bottles last year with the wine, and about half of that is still yet to be bottled for my red wines.
Oh my God. So how big's your garage? Like...
and enough for a car that's not in there, and it's just kind of lining it up. And the benefit is, when you have a 54 litre demijohn, I just need to kind of tuck it in to a corner and then just kind of line up whatever else I'm making next to it. But it becomes quite a interesting mathematical endeavor, because I'm sitting down trying to be like, hey, if I pick 100 kilograms of grapes, am I going to get about 50 litres of wine once I press it all off? So then do I have enough containers to put that in for fermentation. But then I've also got to make sure there's enough headroom for fermentation so it doesn't kind of pop the silicon bung out of the top of...
Is this all special winemaking stuff? Are you getting from Bunnings and stuff like that?
Well, a lot of the picking buckets that I'm getting are kind of food-safe buckets from Bunnings that are like about $15, $20, which is awesome. But then like local brew shops for making beer around Sydney, I can get a 30-litre fermenter or a 5-litre glass carboy. The 5-litre glass carboy was where I started with the mead making.
Wow.
To get that up and running. So that was a lot of fun.
Maybe it's me, but I've got this visual of like your garage is kind of stacked with all these different like basket presses, buckets, and probably like littered through the house as well.
Yeah. Oh,
I'll have my wife complaining as well to me going.
The wine bottles are definitely spread out throughout the house. And I'm kind of this process of reorganizing consistently and kind of decluttering.
Yeah. But you haven't toyed with oak yet, though, right? Is that
I've toyed with a little bit of oak. So one of the ones I'm really excited about is doing a Cabernet. I did it in a French oak barrel, still to be bottled, but it was a nice 25-litre French oak barrel to give it a quite strong flavour with the medium toasts. To add like a chocolatey complexity to it. And then I blended that back in with some French oak wood chips to add some balance, and trying to figure out what the right amount of oak is to add to try and not overpower the fruit characteristic in the wine, is also trying to find that balance in the winemaking process. And people have joked about when I bring about a bottle of wine out, I might prefer an extra oaky wine. Because I'm trying to understand, hey, is this going to be something that ages 5-10 years? Or have I got the balance wrong? And I'd rather learn now to kind of tweak it in, finesse my calculations as I continue to learn.
As you mentioned, oak barrels is expensive, right? So you don't want to stuff it up. So you're trying to go like all one way first, understand what that limit is, and
then potentially bring it back. And some of that we might see in the Merlot, that the blending as trying to make a wine that's greater than the sum of its parts is an interesting idea that, okay, I can make a Cabernet and I can make a Shiraz, but then before I bottle it, what would it look like to maybe test what would a 60-40 blend look like, or a 70-30, to see actually could I make a better wine through that blending process.
Have you had any crazy ideas of kind of blends that people haven't done, or there's a reason why those blends haven't happened?
I've had a few, particularly in the world of mead. That's where I do a lot of experimentation, because when the grapes are ready, you kind of get one opportunity to pick and make wine. With mead, I can get honey year round and do a lot of learning and a lot of repetition. So one of the fun was coming back through duty free, picked up a few bottles of whiskey as part of that. So learning about fortification, and I had some honey from far north Queensland where I made a mead out of, and then it kind of added too much sugar, so the yeast stalled out. And I'm like, oh, this has still got some sweetness to it. What happens if I fortified it and made kind of like a dessert style of wine as part of that? So that was one of my weird and wonderful experiments, where I basically blended it to kind of 20% alcohol. Then it's got some residual sweetness to it. It's got some whiskey. Let's see how it kind of comes together as those two different random flavor components.
Was it good? Or?
I was quite happy with it and gave it some gifts to friends around Christmas. And they're like, oh, wow, we cracked this open. It was like really nice.
Did you tell them what it was?
I did. I had it. And they're like, oh, yeah. And it's like, also make sure like this is not a 12%, this is a 20%. Make sure you know that with how large you're pouring. It was part of the conversation with them.
You should go Chateau Fallon mystery drink, mystery wine.
And that's part of the importance of note-taking as well, because there's just the human element of forgetting. So I could make a few mystery things of like, oh, what did I do there? And I've forgotten if I haven't written it down.
Yeah, put some Coke in it or something like that. Coke and whiskey, there we go. Anyway, it's a nice segue into the mead.
It is.
Which is a Chateau Follent Raspberry Mead 2024. Like, I don't feel mead's like a very popular drink, and the only mead that I've heard before is like a honey mead. But a raspberry mead?
Mead.
Firstly, what's a mead, and then why a raspberry mead?
So a mead is like a honey wine. So instead of a mead being made from grapes, it's honey as the base for fermentation as part of that. So we have a few people in the Amateur Winemakers Club that enjoy making meads, but they also enjoy making fruit wines. So I thought this would be an interesting kind of rosé style of a wine that's come together to make this particular raspberry mead because I've combined some of the fruit winemaking where I got a whole bunch of raspberries from my local fruit store.
Yeah.
Basically froze them, got like a potato masher and mashed them all up to then have this mush effectively. Then I've mixed honey and water with to co-ferment together to get something that's got some raspberry flavor. It's got the raspberry tartness to come quite an interesting
you're like the mad scientist
thing. So it's kind of this mad science approach. So if you put your nose in there, just like
I can smell the honey.
Raspberries just kind of jump out at you.
Raspberries are expensive though, like seriously.
They are. So I made a 5-litre batch scale as part of this. And that was maybe a kilo of raspberries when they were on special at the fruit market.
Very fruity on the nose. Very fruity.
And it fascinates me doing this because sometimes the time in the bottle, the flavors meld together and there's more balance compared to when I last tasted one of these. So that'd be about 12% alcohol off the top of my head without checking the label as part of that. So part of the balance of, hey, how much alcohol is going to be in the wine is based on going back and looking at the amount of sugar that the mix starts off with before you add the yeast and then tracking its process because those yeast will convert the sugar into alcohol as part of that expression.
I was actually expecting to be a lot more sweeter. I don't know. I'm thinking like raspberries and honeys and something like that. It's actually a lot more dry than what I expected to. Like the Chardonnay was sweeter than this.
Yeah. And I've found fascinating, like when people talk about dry wine, the dryness is the fermentation has consumed all the sugar as part of it. And it's just that little bit of phrasing that's got some actual science behind it, which I find fascinating. But then it's also like, oh, then I like a dry style. I also tried making an off-dry style for my wife as well. So it's interesting to kind of compare the pair because mead and honey, people think of, oh, mead's going to be sweet because it's honey. Yeah. But you can actually kind of make a dry style like this.
Has that kind of like, it's not earthy, but it's kind of like a kind of honeycomb kind of smell to it. But it's got some grip to it as well, which is...
some texture from the berries.
Which doesn't make sense because we're not talking about grape skins or anything like that.
And it's probably that time of just having the berries in with the honey and the water, whatever that process is, with it being all together, has kind of given it that structure as part of it. And the other thing I sometimes do with the meads is maybe brew up a batch of tea to add some tannin because it gets me thinking about the balance of you can get tannin from grape skins, you can get tannin from oak, but can I use tea tannin as a way of helping round out the flavor profile of a mead to try and tweak the taste profile of what's in the glass.
That doesn't taste like 12% though as well, right?
And that's part of the dangerous things of meads. You can be like, oh, this is super smooth. This is delicious. So then you might knock back a few. And
it almost tastes healthy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Look, you can get it. I'm not sure how much you'd need to drink to get a serving of fruit.
Oh my God. Like I'm just imagining now, like there's all these other different fruits. You done raspberry, like blueberries would be like...
Yeah. Blueberries. Weird. I haven't done blueberries yet, but it's on probably the bucket list eventually.
Yeah. Strawberries is probably something I'm sure someone's done.
I did a strawberry fruit wine where it was just mash up a whole bunch of strawberries and add sugar and ferment it. Yeah. And that made a mess over the kitchen bench because all the solids from the strawberry came out the top of the S-band airlock. No. So my fermenters often have a plastic plate underneath as part of how that sits together.
Yeah. I ask again, your wife is bought into all this, right?
She definitely, patience is something she demonstrates as I pursue my passion for making wine.
Oh, wow. We touched on it before, but talking about the biodynamic angle and regenerative angle, like what's your view? Like what does biodynamic actually mean?
Yeah.
And how does it kind of translate into what's in the glass?
Definitely. And I think even prepping my notes for this, thinking about the biodynamic approach is a sort of philosophy that can be applied through regenerative practices. So regenerative viticulture might be focused on the outcomes of an ecosystem working together to help bring balance and leaving the ground better and improved year on year as part of it. The biodynamic philosophy might have very specific practices through it. I think one of the fun ones I've heard described is a cow horn filled with manure and then put into the ground to add to the biodiversity of the soil as part of that, as one of the biodynamic preparations that vineyards might use.
Very specific.
It's a very specific, but they have, for whatever reason, like there's a numbering, like almost like you can look up what is biodynamic practice 501 or something. Yeah. There's like a number. I just pulled that off the top of my head. Yeah. But could be a way, whereas the regenerative approach kind of informs what's the outcome. We want to have a vineyard in balance and good, healthy soils.
Is it to what you said before, like healthy ecosystem, healthy environment equals healthy vines, which means good wines.
Yeah. And I think one of my favorite stories with it from Jeff Aston at Tractorless, he will actually graze sheep through his vineyard. And part of the inspiration for how he named his wine label as Tractorless is the sheep going through the vineyards help eat the grass.
Yeah.
So it means he's using the tractor about 60% less throughout that process. And so there's lower intervention needed. But because the sheep are going through, they're adding fertilizer naturally to the soil, which is invigorating it. And I think they're black-faced Hampshire down sheep. So we had to find a very specific sheep to stop their grazing zone eating the grapes. So they have to be looking down rather than up as part of their process. Otherwise, they might graze on the fruit as part of that.
I thought it would be like a weight thing or something like that. It can't be too heavy or something.
And I think there's a benefit to like having the ground compacted, the no-till approach to having the microbial life in the soil and rebuilding living soils so that they're fungally dominant is one word that I've heard them use. Which fascinates me. I'm like, how does that work? To then really have this ecosystem to support the nourishment and the health of the vine. And then theoretically, it also makes it more resilient in drought through better water retention. I think the land holds carbon more as part of it. So it's something I'm really excited about seeing a potential transformation in the approach to vineyard management over the next 5-10 years to adjust for some of the swings in climate, because we can have some really hot seasons, but then there can also be some really intense frosts. So how do you look after these plants in such a way that makes sure that we're going to be making great wine in Australia for decades to come rather than taking all the nutrition out of the soil?
I understand the philosophy. Do you think it's more about the environment or more about the wine?
I like to think like we have the ad with the tacos, ¿por qué no los dos? Why not both? As part of it, there's definitely a personal passion for like stewardship and looking after the environment for me. But there's also, if I want to make the best quality wine and it's making better fruit to put in the glass, why not do it? And I haven't done the math myself, but on how cost effective it is, we can look at how hard things are for farmers with petrol prices at the moment. Are there more cost effective ways to manage vineyards through lower intervention that support the business economics of making wine?
Because last time I checked, sheep doesn't cost petrol, right?
Exactly.
Unless it's other type of sheep. On to our last wine here today, which is a Chateau Fallon Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and Cabernet Sauvignon blend. A French blend. Tell us about this one.
So this one was particularly inspired by seeing the French approach that de Beaurepaire take with their wines and their philosophy. They've got some limestone chalk soils which give them almost like a Burgundy Bordeaux-like terroir for the aspect of it. And it made me learn last year, there's a left bank style of Bordeaux and there's a right bank style of Bordeaux. But what do they mean? And it was that epiphany. I think the left bank is always a Cabernet dominant blend with my left hand. And then with my right hand, that right bank is Merlot dominant with potentially some Cabernet Franc in there. So this is where I kind of blended a group of wine together to really try and understand, can that give it some plush red fruit? Can the Cabernet really kind of aromatic lift? Was part of it with how it blends together. Maybe this is an example of a bit more restrained use of oak through the way that it's been blended together, because I might be able to over oak a portion and then bring it back through blending.
So there's a bit of oak on this one.
Yeah, there's a little bit of oak in here.
Are you also playing around? People like to use a bit of stems, bit of bunches. Are you doing that as well?
here and there, we'll add a little bit. I think this year I've probably destemmed most things, but probably when I've done it with friends and done a little bit of foot stumping, it's a little bit more fun to leave some of the stems on as part of crushing the grapes. And it also helps the juice flow through the basket press a little bit better. But then the stems can add a different kind of texture and tannin and flavour to the wine whilst it's fermenting.
That's surprisingly quite well balanced.
So, and this is one where I've probably theoretically I should sit down and bench test the wine and try the different ratios and blends. I've kind of taken this one and tried to maybe blend it arbitrarily according to the golden ratio of how do I have maybe that, I think 60%-ish Merlot, followed by some Cabernet Franc, followed by some Cabernet Sauvignon to try and frame it really nicely.
Almost feels like the ones leading up to it's a bit of fun, serious, but still a bit of fun with it. And this is your most serious type of wine.
So this is a bit more serious table wine. And I think from fermenting wine in my garage, red wines are better with the variation in temperature at ambient, especially Sydney, Australia ambient temperature, where white wines, to get that pretty aromatic profile, you need to have it cooler. So I think I'm also a bit more passionate and emotionally invested in my red wines as my preferred drink.
I didn't ask this before, but obviously you're amateur winemaker at the moment. Was this ever a stepping stone to being more focused and actually jumping into the wine industry and being a professional winemaker?
I think I'll definitely try and sell wine commercially at a small scale. I think I'm dreaming about in 2028, what would it look like to produce 250 cases? So that'd be a jump of going from 300 bottles to 3,000 bottles. And trying to understand, hey, what would it actually take to do a more serious scale? It so happens that might coincide when I hit long service leave at my job. So I might have a little bit of time to block it out and do a vintage and experiment and do something memorable that year. And that is something that I'd be excited about. Oh, is that something I can maybe do a little bit of contract winemaking on the side where I can actually balance taking annual leave as well as working my day job?
I guess I'm trying to do vintages with proper wineries.
Exactly. And understanding just the equipment and moving wine from tank to tank and pumps and processes. Because a lot of what I'm doing at home is involving a siphon and gravity, which is fairly kind of basic physics to get that happening.
It's called low intervention winemaking is what people call it.
Low intervention winemaking is what I am doing because life gets busy and I got all the other things. So I'm kind of a weekend winemaker and I often try and make and pick grapes around social events and other commitments.
Wow.
So I'm often trying to align when are the grapes ready with when I have availability in my calendar as well to go pick them.
So your dream of going from 300 to 3,000, I gather the 3,000 still not going to be made from your garage though, right?
No, I think that will have to go definitely into some kind of commercial facility. And from my understanding, to actually get a liquor license, I need to be making on a commercial premises with particular zoning. So that's where I'm trying to figure out how do I get from here in 2026 to having a liquor license as part of that for a little bit of fun, because
if only your sovereign land was in Australia, then you could have all sorts.
I could have that all sorted, just built up really high as part of that process, which would be a little bit of fun. But learning about the process for that compliance and make sure I'm doing it right and properly for the New South Wales legislation framework we have. But for now, I get to make wine and share it and gift it to friends, which is just such a joy. More blessed to give than receive, and seeing the smiles on people's faces and hearing their feedback and learning what styles they like, what styles they don't like as part of this process.
You're playing around with all these different varietals at the moment. In the future, do you see you kind of focusing on certain styles?
I think there will definitely be a role for mead in my journey and my story because it's just so interesting and different. So can you make a table mead in the style of a dry red or white wine as part of that? And then it also gives me the flexibility to do stuff like that out of season, because then I could do that maybe September. No grapes are in season yet. But then it gives me some flexibility to play around with a few different things as part of a differentiating point. But then I think there's also a part of me that I'm I love Shiraz. So that'll probably be one of the go-tos that I'll try and make year in, year out in one way, shape or form, as well as Cabernet Sauvignon holds a special place in my heart.
Shiraz, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Mead. I'm sure you've heard this one before, but you should do the one which is like the need for Mead, right?
I like that, the need for Mead. I think the other thing I'd add to that is I think I also love the challenge of making a sparkling wine in an off-dry style. Yeah. I was chatting with a winemaker and he's like, sparkling and off-dry sweet wines are the two hardest types to make because you don't have all the latest and greatest technology to be able to stop fermentation, to be able to do the sterile filtration. Yeah. So it's a bit of a hit and miss type of experiment. With the twinkling is the great example of my learning experience as I build on actually, no, there's other ways to make sure the CO2 is in the bottle as part of that experience and expression.
I love that twinkling. Like you can call it like twinkle, little Chardonnay. Or
it makes
like
it sound magical.
I know. I come up with all the names for you already.
and I think it's a lovely expression of marketing as well. Yeah. So one of the wines that you and Jason can potentially enjoy later is a Chardonnay. Yeah. Same Chardonnay grapes as the sparkling, but it's a still white wine. Yeah. And I often like to label things as avant-garde when they're a bit alternative. Mm. So how can I take what I've made and reframe it as that alternative? So that was one where it oxidized a bit because it was left off to the side in the garage. Yeah. I added French oak to try and balance it. Yeah. And I also have flexibility to do things that I see in Mead that traditional winemakers can't do, like adding rooibos tea. Mm. So I added that for an infusion over kind of 24, 48 hours because it's got antioxidant properties to try and build body, but also help with repositioning the flavor profile and the body of that wine to bring it more into balance.
Wow. No, it's been a fascinating discussion because often we talk to other seasoned winemakers or kind of like serious wines, but it's good to talk to an amateur, a person that's taking on that passion, taking on the curiosity and started creating their own wines. Like these are the wines that you wouldn't try, you wouldn't have anywhere else. But it's also very fascinating because each one has a story and it's also a reflection of yourself as well, James. So thank you. Any last comments for our listeners?
The joy of the journey is being able to try and do things different to a bottle shop and trying to do the best with what I have at home with the conditions, which has been a lot of fun. And I think I'm probably passionate about seeing how the regenerative process in the winemaking industry develops over the next decade or so to make stronger vineyards throughout Australia. And I'll be definitely keeping my eye out in bottle shops for wines that are made with a regenerative philosophy as a consumer.
Is there any, like we always see organic fruit, organic, is there something that's as a stamp of?
Yeah, I haven't. You might be able to see biodynamic certification. Yeah. I think Fallon is doing an excellent job over in Western Australia. I think sustainably certified is kind of what I'm most noticing that I can use as a reference point. But then I like to think regenerative is how do you go just beyond keeping the status quo to then building something that gives back to the soil and nature to continue to make better fruit year on year.
Fantastic. Thank you. So check out the Sydney Amateur Winemakers Club at www.sydneyawc.com. And if you also want to learn more about James's Chateau Fallon and look forward to the different labels that will come through as well. He also has a website.
I do.
chateaufallon.com.au. It is as it is kind of mentioned on the bottle there.
And I do have a newsletter if people want to sign up to it as well and follow along with the journey. Yeah. I am consistently inconsistent with sending out an actual newsletter, but you can also follow along for social media.
Is it signed off by Lord James as well?
I have got Lord James peppered throughout the website, but on my Instagram, you get to see kind of the behind the scenes of James Follent making wine, and my handle is @JamesFollent if you want to follow along there and see how my story evolves over the coming years.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. We'll wrap up there. As we say here on The Wind Up, we drink, we try, we learn, and we connect. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.